Room 4. Reflections of the vanished. There are places in Los Angeles the maps forget, blocks where the streetlights don't bother to turn on anymore, where the wind whistles through rusted fire escapes like a warning no one listens to, and in one of those forgotten corners, at the far end of an alley lined with cracked pavement and graffiti that no one bothers to scrub away, stands the Wilshire Crest Apartments. The building has seen better decades. Its pale yellow paint has long since faded into the color of cigarette ash. The hallways are narrow, lined with water-stained ceilings and buzzing fluorescent lights that can decide whether they're alive or dead. Even in daylight, the place feels like it's holding its breath. Most tenants keep their heads down. They mind their own business, never speak to their neighbors, and certainly never walk to the end of the fourth floor, where apartment 404 sits like a tumor. They don't say it out loud, but everyone knows. People who live in 404 don't stay long. They leave in the dead of night. No note, no call, no moving truck. Some don't leave at all. They just stop existing. The city calls them disappearances. The residents whisper a different word: vanishings. On a cold night in late November, Lieutenant Daniel Carter stood in front of that building, watching the wind ripple through the plastic crime scene tape like a dying flag. Carter wasn't a man who scared easily. 10 years with the LAPD had seen to that. But as he stared at the shadowed windows above, a heaviness pressed against his chest. Not fear, exactly, but something older, something heavier. The feeling you get when you're about to step into a place the world itself has given up on. The case that brought him here was simple enough on paper. Ethan Lee, 21, a quiet college student, gone without a trace. His mother reported him missing after he stopped answering her calls. Last known address: apartment 404. A voice crackled in Carter's earpiece. Joe Harris, the building's aging night guard, had been instructed to meet him at the door. Detective Carter. The old man's voice was gravel, worn down by too many cigarettes and too many graveyard shifts. You'll hear about the kid. That's right, Carter said, stepping into the dim lobby. The air inside smelled faintly of damp concrete and something metallic, like rusted pipes. Joe shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the flickering security monitors mounted on the wall. One grainy feed showed the empty fourth-floor corridor. At the very end, the number 404 glowed faintly on a door, though no light source was visible. "I'll take you up," Joe said, though his tone made it sound more like a threat than a favor. "But I should tell you, Detective, that unit's been sealed for a year. After the last one went missing, no one's lived there since." Carter raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't management board it up? Joe's eyes darted back to the monitor. "Some doors don't like to stay shut." The elevator groaned as it climbed. The fluorescent light inside buzzed, flickered, and died for a moment before stuttering back to life. Carter said nothing, but his hand tightened slightly around the grip of the flashlight holstered at his belt. When the elevator door slid open, the fourth-floor hallway greeted them with a wave of stale, cold air. The floor tiles were cracked, the walls marred with long streaks of water damage that looked disturbingly like claw marks in the dim light. And at the very end, apartment 404 its door, painted once white, but now the color of bone, bore the faint outline of a long-forgotten police seal. The padlock was rusted, barely hanging on, like the door had been trying to open itself while no one was watching. Joe didn't step forward. "This is as far as I go," he muttered, already backing toward the elevator. "You need me, I'll be downstairs, but I wouldn't stay long in there if I were you." Carter crouched, examining the lock and seal. He could see the scratches small, deliberate around the latch. Not from the inside. He tore off the tape, snapped the padlock with a quick twist of his pry bar, and pushed. The door didn't just open, it sighed, as if something on the other side had been holding its breath for far too long. The air that spilled out was wet, heavy, and cold. The kind of cold that doesn't belong indoors, not in Los Angeles, not in late autumn. Carter stepped inside, his boots sinking slightly against a floor that shouldn't feel soft. The apartment was nearly empty. No furniture, save for a single wooden table pushed against the wall. A broken ceiling fan hung above, its blades motionless, one of them bent as if by a hand that didn't know its own strength. The walls bore faint smears of something darker than mildew, and in the upper corner, barely visible, a tiny surveillance camera blinked red, aimed directly at the door. Carter exhaled slowly, scanning the room with the beam of his flashlight. Every shadow seemed too deep, every corner a little too still. His instincts, honed by years of chasing men with knives and guns, told him there was no one here. But another part of him, a part he didn't often listen to, whispered otherwise. He pulled a set of gloves from his pocket and disconnected the camera. Whatever had happened to Ethan Lee, someone had been watching. Hours later, back at the precinct, the footage told a story that made Carter's jaw tighten. Ethan had moved in 5 days prior. For most of that time, the footage showed him doing normal things, instant noodles, scrolling his phone, staring out the window. But on the 6th night, at exactly 3 a.m., something changed. Ethan, who had been sleeping soundly, suddenly sat up. His eyes were open wide. His face was slack, expressionless. Slowly, he turned his head not toward the door, not toward the window, but toward the corner of the room, where the wall met the ceiling. There was nothing there. And yet Ethan's gaze lingered, unblinking, for nearly a full minute. Then he stood, opened the door, and walked out. He never came back. The footage offered no answers, only more questions. The hallway lights, which were mostly activated and had triggered every other time Ethan left the room, stayed dark when he stepped into the corridor, almost as if the building itself refused to acknowledge him. Carter leaned back in his chair, the faint buzz of the precinct's fluorescent lights drilling into his skull. Outside, the city roared with the usual chaos sirens, distant honks, the hum of neon signs. But in his head, all he could hear were the soft creaks of apartment 404's door, and the way the darkness inside had felt alive. He replayed the footage again. This time, he noticed something new. Just as Ethan steps into the hall, before the screen flickers and cuts to static, a faint reflection flashes across the darkened mirror hanging near the door. Not Ethan. Not Carter's own reflection from reviewing the footage. Someone else. Someone tall, still standing in the bathroom doorway, smiling faintly. And then the screen went black. The first time Daniel Carter returned to apartment 404 alone, the building seemed to know. The elevator creaked louder. The lights along the hallway buzzed like hornets. And every step Carter took down that long, narrow corridor felt like walking deeper into the lungs of something that was holding its breath. The kind of silence that swallows your own heartbeat, making you question if you even exist in the space anymore. He stood before the door again, its pale, bone-colored paint peeling in strips, and the faint outline of the old police seal like a scar across its frame. He reached for the knob. The cold metal felt slick, almost damp, as though the building itself had been sweating. The air inside was still wet and heavy, as if whatever stale breath had been trapped inside hadn't dissipated since his last visit. Carter stepped carefully, his boots echoing with soft, dull thuds. He paused, let the silence stretch. There were no sounds of plumbing, no hum of electricity, just the faint creak of the bent ceiling fan, swaying slightly even though no air stirred. He set his equipment on the Taboola portable audio recorder, a sensitive EMF meter, and a small camera of his own. He flicked the recorder on, placed it in the center of the table, and began a slow, deliberate sweep of the room. The flashlight's beam crawled over the walls, across a crack in the plaster near the floor. Carter crouched. Something glinted inside the fissure, a few long, black strands of hair caught in the jagged gap. He tugged them free gently, slipping them into a plastic evidence bag. Standing again, he scanned the apartment. For a place connected to so many disappearances, it was too clean. No blood, no stains, no signs of struggle or anyone ever truly living here. It felt like a set dressed up, just enough to convince you someone once existed here, but hollow, like the people had been erased rather than removed. Back at the precinct, Carter played back the audio recording. For the first few minutes, only static and faint hums of the building. Then the noise shifted. A sound emerged, low and deliberate, a dragging, shuffling rhythm, as though bare feet were moving lightly over tile, far away but growing closer. It lasted 15 seconds. Then, 3 metallic knocks, not random, evenly spaced, hollow cold. Carter increased the volume. The knocks seemed to echo from inside the walls. He traced the sound to the building's plumbing system. A maintenance team opened a corroded section of pipe near 404. Lodged deep inside was something small and black, a shattered wireless earbud. Serial tracing confirmed it was Ethan Lee's. Ethan hadn't simply walked out of the apartment and vanished. He'd been dragged funneled through parts of the building no one was supposed to access. Seeking answers, Carter visited Ethan's mother again. She looked more hollow than before, her eyes swollen and red but eerily calm as she spoke. "He called me the night before," she said softly. "He said he couldn't shake the feeling someone was watching him, that he could feel them behind him, even when he was alone." Then the line went dead. That was the last time I heard his voice. When Carter asked if Ethan had ever shown signs of paranoia or instability, she shook her head. "No, he was always cheerful. He sent me photos every morning of the stray black cat outside his window. I still have them." Carter scrolled through her phone, pausing at the final image. The cat sat curled on the narrow ledge outside apartment 404's window, but behind it, just barely visible in the grainy frame, stood a figure, a woman in a white dress, back turned, long black hair cascading down her spine. Her feet weren't there. The timestamp read 2:03 a.m., only minutes before Ethan vanished. Experts later suggested it could be a reflection, a trick of light, maybe even tampering. But Carter knew what his gut was telling him. Someone wanted people to believe they were seeing a ghost. Someone who understood how to weave fear like a net, trapping the mind before the body ever disappeared. He needed to know more. At dusk, Carter knocked on doors along the 4th floor, searching for anyone who would talk. Most refused to answer or slammed their doors shut. Finally, Susan Green, a weary woman from 403, opened her door just wide enough to speak. "I don't believe in ghosts," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "But some nights, around midnight, I'd hear knocking. Always 3 knocks. Always at my door. When I looked through the peephole, nothing. Not a sound. Not a shadow. But it came back the next night, and the next, for a week straight." When Carter asked if anyone had dared to enter 404 recently, Susan nodded reluctantly. "Some kid, 16 maybe, took one of those online haunted apartment challenges. He managed to pick the lock one night, came running out screaming minutes later. Fever hit him by morning. His family packed up and left the very next day. Never came back for their deposit." Carter tracked the boy down, a pale, twitchy teenager named David Ortiz, now living miles away. David's voice was little more than a whisper when Carter asked what he saw. "There was someone," David said, staring at the floor, "standing in the corner. Couldn't see their face. But when I turned to leave, I glanced at the bathroom mirror, and in the mirror, they were smiling at me." A chill slid down Carter's spine. This wasn't a haunting, it was precision. Someone was staging every sound, every reflection, every sensation to shred the nerves of anyone who entered that room until fear itself broke them apart. Carter dug through a decade's worth of tenant records. 7 people had called apartment 400 for home. 3 vanished. 1 killed himself months after moving out. Another was institutionalized for psychosis. 2 more were never heard from again, and 1 name stood apart: Laura Bennett, the only woman to live there. She didn't vanish, but she died falling from the 4th floor in 2013. The report said she jumped. Her brother, when Carter found him, still trembled remembering her final call. "She wasn't suicidal," he said, voice shaking. "She was happy. But that night, she called me, sobbing so hard I could barely make out her words. She said someone in the mirror told her to jump, told her she'd be free." The police at the time chalked it up to a psychotic break. Carter wasn't so sure. The puzzle was forming, but one piece was missing: the hand behind the strings. Someone alive, someone who knew how to use fear, mirrors, and sound as weapons. That night, as Carter sifted through his notes in the dim glow of his apartment, his phone buzzed. No caller ID, just a single text: "If you value your life, never step into 404 again." No signature, no traceable number. But as he read it, from his laptop speakers came the faint sound he'd left paused earlier. Those 3 hollow knocks, still looping, measured, inescapable. The text message still glowed faintly on Carter's phone screen as he sat in the dim quiet of his apartment. "If you value your life, never step into 404 again." The words hung there like a whisper he couldn't unhear, a weight he couldn't shake, but he knew himself too well. Walking away wasn't an option. Not now. Sleep didn't come that night. Every sound in his apartment seemed louder than it should have been: the tick of the kitchen clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the wind brushing against the balcony door. And beneath all of it, he thought he could hear it again. That rhythm, 3 hollow knocks, like something tapping the bones of the building itself. He told himself it was memory, a phantom echo from the recording. But deep down, He wasn't sure. By morning, he had already decided what came next. No more waiting, no more circling the edges of the puzzle. If someone was orchestrating this nightmare, he needed to find them before another name was added to the list of the vanished. He didn't report his plans to the department. He didn't want interference, didn't want someone higher up shutting him down for wasting resources on ghost stories. Instead, he called one person he trusted. Detective Michael Reyes answered on the second ring. Reyes had been his partner years ago, before being reassigned to cold cases. Quiet, meticulous, unflinchingly loyal, the kind of man who didn't ask questions unless he had to. "I need you to pull everything on the 2015 Wilmont House fire," Carter said without preamble. "The one that supposedly killed Dr. Quentin Price. Forensics, insurance reports, anything." There was a pause. "Price, the psych professor who got stripped of his license. I thought he burned to death." "So did I. Check the records." Quietly. "Call me when you have something." Reyes didn't press. He just said, "Got it," and hung up. The rest of Carter's day was spent inside the Wilshire Crest, tracing the arteries of the building like a surgeon trying to find a tumor. Every pipe, every ventilation shaft, every service corridor was a potential passage. The tenants had stopped looking him in the eye. Some closed their doors as soon as they heard his boots on the stairs. By now, his presence here marked him as part of whatever curse they feared. In the maintenance storage room, behind a row of rusted metal shelving, Carter's flashlight caught a seam in the wall, a vertical crack, subtle but deliberate. When he knocked, it sounded hollow. He found the latch beneath a false panel and pried it open. The door was narrow, locked with a simple numeric keypad, the kind a determined person could bypass in minutes. Carter's fingers worked quickly, overriding the mechanism with a portable decoder from his kit. The lock clicked, and the door creaked inward. The space beyond was barely large enough to stand in. A crude chamber, its walls lined with faded soundproofing foam. The air smelled of dust and faintly of copper. A small ventilation fan rattled softly in the corner, and a single power outlet hummed with life. On the floor lay a stack of worn, leather-bound notebooks. Carter knelt, flipping one open. The handwriting inside was jagged, almost frenzied, but precise. Each notebook bore the name of a tenant on its cover. Laura Bennett, Paranoia Cycle, Day 6. Ethan Lee, Panic Threshold, Night 18. Adam Hayes, Mirror Phase Response. Week 3. The pages were filled with charts of sleep cycles, stress indicators, and notes on auditory and visual responses. Interspersed among them were rough sketches of human brains, diagrams of shattered mirrors, and strange, angular symbols Carter didn't recognize, half scientific, half occult. On the far wall, scrawled in thick black strokes that had bled into the foam, was a single phrase: "There are no ghosts, only the mind, and it is far more terrifying." Carter stared at the words for a long time, the weight of them sinking into his chest. Whoever wrote this wasn't just experimenting. They believed it. They worshipped it. To them, fear wasn't a byproduct, it was the instrument. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. "Reyes, I pulled the Wilmont fire files," Reyes said. His voice was hushed, tense. "You were right. The whole thing stinks. The coroner never got a DNA match on Price. They based the ID on paperwork found near the remains. And here's the kicker: Price filed for a new state ID just a week before the fire, at the same address as the woman who died with him." Carter's grip on the phone tightened. "So he staged the whole thing. Almost definitely. Killed the woman, burned the house, walked away clean, and he's been hiding here ever since," Carter said, more to himself than to Reyes. "Danny, if this guy's still alive, he's been watching you. Be careful. I don't think he lets people walk away." The line went dead. That night, as Carter pieced together his notes, the room around him felt wrong, too still. The hum of the street outside was gone, like someone had muted the city. Then came the sound again. Knock, a pause. Knock, another pause. Knock. From the balcony, gun drawn. Carter moved silently to the glass door. Beyond it, the alley stretched below, washed in the sickly yellow glow of a flickering streetlight. No one there, no movement, only a folded slip of paper wedged into the frame, trembling in the faint breeze. He opened it. Jagged black ink, scrawled in a hand both deliberate and unhinged. "You've seen me now. It's my turn to see you." By the time he stepped out onto the balcony, the alley was empty. Not even the wind remained. The words hung there like a whisper he couldn't unhear, a weight he couldn't shake, but he knew himself too well. Walking away wasn't an option. Not now. Sleep didn't come that night. Every sound in his apartment seemed louder than it should have been: the tick of the kitchen clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the wind brushing against the balcony door. And beneath all of it, he thought he could hear it again. That rhythm, 3 hollow knocks, like something tapping the bones of the building itself. He told himself it was memory, a phantom echo from the recording, but deep down, he wasn't sure. By morning, he had already decided what came next. No more waiting, no more circling the edges of the puzzle. If someone was orchestrating this nightmare, he needed to find them before another name was added to the list of the vanished. He didn't report his plans to the department. He didn't want interference, didn't want someone higher up shutting him down for wasting resources on ghost stories. Instead, he called one person he trusted. Detective Michael Reyes answered on the second ring. Reyes had been his partner years ago, before being reassigned to cold cases. Quiet, meticulous, unflinchingly loyal, the kind of man who didn't ask questions unless he had to. "I need you to pull everything on the 2015 Wilmont House fire," Carter said without preamble. "The one that supposedly killed Dr. Quentin Price. Forensics, insurance reports, anything." There was a pause. "Price, the psych professor who got stripped of his license. I thought he burned to death. So did I. Check the records." Quietly. "Call me when you have something." Reyes didn't press. He just said, "Got it," and hung up. The rest of Carter's day was spent inside the Wilshire Crest, tracing the arteries of the building like a surgeon trying to find a tumor. Every pipe, every ventilation shaft, every service corridor was a potential passage. The tenants had stopped looking him in the eye. Some closed their doors as soon as they heard his boots on the stairs. By now, his presence here marked him as part of whatever curse they feared. In the maintenance storage room, behind a row of rusted metal shelving, Carter's flashlight caught a seam in the wall, a vertical crack, subtle but deliberate. When he knocked, it sounded hollow. He found the latch beneath a false panel and pried it open. The door was narrow, locked with a simple numeric keypad, the kind a determined person could bypass in minutes. Carter's fingers worked quickly, overriding the mechanism with a portable decoder from his kit. The lock clicked, and the door creaked inward. The space beyond was barely large enough to stand in. A crude chamber, its walls lined with faded soundproofing foam. The air smelled of dust and faintly of copper. A small ventilation fan rattled softly in the corner, and a single power outlet hummed with life. On the floor lay a stack of worn, leather-bound notebooks. Carter knelt, flipping one open. The handwriting inside was jagged, almost frenzied, but precise. Each notebook bore the name of a tenant on its cover. Laura Bennett, Paranoia Cycle, Day 6. Ethan Lee, Panic Threshold, Night 18. Adam Hayes, Mirror Phase Response. Week 3. The pages were filled with charts of sleep cycles, stress indicators, and notes on auditory and visual responses. Interspersed among them were rough sketches of human brains, diagrams of shattered mirrors, and strange, angular symbols Carter didn't recognize, half scientific, half occult. On the far wall, scrawled in thick black strokes that had bled into the foam, was a single phrase: "There are no ghosts, only the mind, and it is far more terrifying." Carter stared at the words for a long time, the weight of them sinking into his chest. Whoever wrote this wasn't just experimenting. They believed it. They worshipped it. To them, fear wasn't a byproduct, it was the instrument. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. "Reyes, I pulled the Wilmont fire files," Reyes said. His voice was hushed, tense. "You were right. The whole thing stinks. The coroner never got a DNA match on Price. They based the ID on paperwork found near the remains. And here's the kicker: Price filed for a new state ID just a week before the fire, at the same address as the woman who died with him." Carter's grip on the phone tightened. "So he staged the whole thing. Almost definitely. Killed the woman, burned the house, walked away clean, and he's been hiding here ever since," Carter said, more to himself than to Reyes. "Danny, if this guy is still alive, he's been watching you. Be careful. I don't think he lets people walk away." The line went dead. That night, as Carter pieced together his notes, the room around him felt wrong, too still. The hum of the street outside was gone, like someone had muted the city. Then came the sound again. Knock. A pause. Knock. Another pause. Knock. From the balcony. Gun drawn. Carter moved silently to the glass door. Beyond it, the alley stretched below, washed in the sickly yellow glow of a flickering streetlight. No one there. No movement. Only a folded slip of paper wedged into the frame, trembling in the faint breeze. He opened it. Jagged black ink, scrawled in a hand both deliberate and unhinged. You've seen me. Now, it's my turn to see you. By the time he stepped out onto the balcony, the alley was empty. Not even the wind remained. The following evening, Carter returned to the Wilshire Crest. This time, he wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for him. He descended past the maintenance floor, deeper into the building's skeletal underbelly, where the blueprints showed nothing but disused utility corridors. The air grew colder, heavier, the concrete walls slick with condensation. Strange scuff marks marred the floor-long, thin streaks, as though something heavy had been dragged repeatedly through these tunnels. At the end of one corridor, his flashlight beam caught on a sheet of rusted metal bolted to the wall. It was too clean at the edges, too deliberate, a disguise. He tore it away, revealing a steel door, its surface painted to blend with the concrete. He forced it open. The room beyond was unlike anything else in the building, a hidden bunker, humming with faint electricity. The walls were lined with old but functional surveillance equipment. Tables were littered with recording devices, miniature cameras, broken headphones, and bundles of coiled wiring. On the far wall, dozens of photographs were pinned in neat rows of tenant who had ever lived in 404, their faces circled in red ink. Beneath each photo, meticulous notes about their habits, sleep cycles, fears, and eventual outcome. But it was the monitors that froze Carter where he stood. A dozen screens flickered softly, each streaming live footage from apartments throughout the building. One of them showed Carter's own desk at the precinct, another, his apartment balcony, another, the hallway outside his bedroom. He felt the prickle of being watched crawl up his spine, though every instinct told him the watcher was already here. The faint squeal of hinges cut through the room. Carter turned, gun raised. From the shadows at the far end of the bunker, a man stepped forward, gaunt white-haired, his face pale and lined like paper left too long in the sun. He wore a tattered lab coat, its once white fabric stained with time. His eyes were black pits, sharp and unblinking, and when they met Carter's, it felt like being pinned beneath a predator's gaze. "Lieutenant Carter," the man said softly, his voice steady, almost gentle. "At last, you've made it to the center of the maze." Carter didn't lower his weapon. "Quentin Price, you're under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, psychological torture, and the deaths of at least 7 people. Step away from the controls." Price tilted his head slightly, as though studying a curious specimen. Then he smiled. It wasn't wide or manic. It was small, almost serene. "You've made it further than anyone," he said. "Through every layer, through fear, doubt, the whispers in the mirrors. All the others broke long before now. But you stayed sharp. You survived. Which is why I'm offering you something no one else has earned." Carter's grip tightened on the gun. "You're done, Price. No more experiments. No more victims." Price's smile didn't falter. "Are you sure that's a gun you're holding, Lieutenant?" Before Carter could answer, the air around him warped. The monitors flickered violently, cycling through distorted images, faces screaming, mirrors cracking, flashes of his own reflection smiling back at him. A piercing, high-pitched tone rang out, vibrating in his skull. The lights dimmed and pulsed, the floor tilting beneath his feet, though he knew it wasn't moving. The world dissolved into a blur of shadows and shapes. Carter's heartbeat thundered, but the sound was distant, like hearing it underwater. He could feel his grip on the gun slipping, not physically, but in his mind, the certainty of it fraying. In the flicker of one monitor, he saw himself standing alone in the bunker, his gun pointed not at Price, but at his own reflection in the mirror mounted on the far wall. Price's voice slid through the haze like silk. "See how fragile it is. Reality, the mind. One gentle push, and the line blurs. You're different, though. Carter, you can hold your balance longer than most. That's why I chose you." Carter's breath came hard and fast. He forced his hand into his pocket, pulling out the small glass vial he'd prepared, a mixture of peppermint oil and concentrated caffeine. A crude but effective sensory jolt. He uncapped it and inhaled deeply, the sharp, biting scent cutting through the fog in his head like a blade. The world steadied. The tone faded. The monitors slowed, their images stabilizing. Price stood where he had been, his smile a fraction thinner but still present. "Impressive," he murmured. "Few know how to anchor themselves. Fewer still succeed. You might be the one worthy of inheriting what I've built." Carter's voice was a low growl. "You're not a scientist. You're not a visionary. You're just a sadist with a god complex." Price sighed softly, as though disappointed in a promising pupil. "Then I suppose our time together must end." A shrill alarm erupted. Red lights flared, bathing the bunker in pulses of crimson. A synthetic voice echoed from unseen speakers. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 30 seconds. Before Carter could move, Price slipped through a narrow passage behind the control panel, the panel sliding shut behind him with a hiss. The opening was too narrow to follow, leaving Carter no choice but to retreat the way he came. The explosion hit as he cleared the steel door, a blast of heat and force shaking the concrete corridors, knocking him hard against the wall. He stumbled but kept moving, lungs burning, ears ringing as the bunker collapsed behind him in a storm of fire and dust. When he emerged back into the frigid night air, the Wilshire crest trembled but held. Smoke curled from the cracks of its foundation like the building itself was exhaling after holding something in for too long. Rescue teams arrived within the hour. They found nothing, no body, no surviving equipment. The bunker had been wiped clean, reduced to ash and ruin. For the second time, Quentin Price had vanished. 4 weeks after the explosion, Daniel Carter told himself it was over. He told himself that Quentin Price had either died in that bunker or fled so far into the shadows that he would never that the Wilshire crest, scarred and silent, would finally be condemned and torn down. But the nights told a different story. Carter couldn't sleep without the blinds drawn tight, and even then, shadows bled through the cracks. He heard things soft, deliberate sounds that didn't belong, the faint scrape of something along his hallway floor, a whisper beneath the hum of his refrigerator, so low it barely registered as human. And always, when he closed his eyes, the memory of that warped moment in the bunker returned, the monitors flickering, his reflection smiling back at him, not like himself, but like something waiting to take his place. 3 weeks after the blast, he left Los Angeles altogether, retreating to a cabin miles north of the city. He thought the distance, the quiet, the clean air would help him breathe again. It didn't. The first morning there, Carter woke to find a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the front door. No footprints in the frost outside. No tire tracks on the dirt road leading to the cabin. Just the note, written in that same jagged black ink he'd seen before. "You've been watching yourself in mirrors too much, haven't you?" He didn't call the police. He didn't tell Reyes. Some instinct told him this wasn't a threat meant to be reported. It was a seed, a whisper meant to grow roots in his mind. That night, as rain lashed to the windows and the wind moaned through the trees, Carter sat alone in the living room. The lights were off. He stared into the dark screen of the unplugged television across from him. And there, faintly, he saw it. Not himself. Not exactly. The figure in the reflection had his face, but the eyes were wrong, darker, hungrier. The mouth curved upward into a small, deliberate smile. Carter didn't move, didn't breathe. The reflection raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and knocked 3 times on the inside of the glass. The next day, Carter received an email. The sender's address was cryptic: Q.Price, 1947 @darkmail.net. The subject line read only, "The Final Experiment." Inside was a single line of text: "Look closely, Daniel. The ghost you've been chasing isn't me. It's you." Beneath it was a series of video files. Each one was footage of Carter during his investigation, interviewing Laura Bennett's brother, searching apartment 404, reviewing Ethan Lee's recordings. But in each clip, something was wrong. His posture was different, too rigid, too deliberate. His expressions didn't match the moments. In one, as Laura's brother sobbed, Carter's mouth curved ever so slightly, as if in satisfaction. In another, as he scrolled through Ethan's final photos, his eyes lingered on the faint figure behind the cat, not with fear, but fascination. The clips blurred the line between surveillance and hallucination. Were they real recordings, doctored, or was Price somehow still pulling the strings, bending Carter's memory until he couldn't trust his own reflection? At the bottom of the email was one final line: "Congratulations, you lasted longer than any of them, which is why you'll carry this forward, not as a subject, but as the next one." The laptop slipped from Carter's hands, the crash echoing through the empty cabin. He stumbled back, breath ragged, eyes darting to the darkened window beside him. Outside, through the rain and fog, stood a man in a dark coat, holding a grey umbrella. His face was pale, obscured by the downpour, but Carter could feel the weight of his gaze, even from across the yard. Carter lunged for the door, yanking it open, stepping out into the storm. The yard was empty, the road was empty. Only the note he'd read the night before remained, soaked through, stuck to the mud at his feet. 3 hollow knocks echoed from inside the cabin behind him. Months passed. Los Angeles forgot Daniel Carter. The department listed him on indefinite leave. Reyes, despite his efforts, couldn't trace him beyond a few scattered sightings at a gas station in Nevada, a motel near Portland, a flicker of his face on a security camera in Seattle, and then he, too, vanished. Somewhere, far from Wilshire Crest, far from Los Angeles, another building stands. Another aging apartment complex, the kind no one notices until it's too late. Inside a dimly lit room lined with glowing monitors, a man sits silently before a wall of screens. His fingers dance over a keyboard, pulling up camera feeds from hallways, stairwells, and behind mirrors. On one screen, a new tenanta young woman with tired eyes enters her apartment, dragging a battered suitcase behind her. The camera's angle is strange, watching her not from above, but from inside the mirror above a bathroom sink. The man at the desk leans forward, the glow of the screens casting shadows across his face. His expression is calm, cold, unwavering. It's Daniel Carter. His eyes are dark, unreadable, as he watches the woman move about her new home. Not as a detective, not as a victim, but as the one behind the glass, and somewhere deep within the building, the sound begins again. Knock, knock, knock. A rhythm that means another name will soon be added to the list. The screens flicker once, then settle into a steady glow as Carter leans back in his chair. A faint smile curves his lips, the same one Price had worn in that collapsing bunker. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying with it a low whisper that seems to seep through the walls. There are no ghosts, only the mind, and it is far more terrifying. The lights dim, the monitors hum, and apartment 404, wherever it now exists, breathes in as another soul crosses its threshold.